We need a Kane versus Bods in Moog battle one day. How often do you use the grid, poly or effects VST in your recent projects? Adding transients to a piano. Why do most analog synthesizers, particularly budget ones, not have a selectable sine wave? Any chance you can use your powers of persuasion and see if Sonic Academy can cajole other bitwig producers to producing content? I think people struggle with somebody having a signature sound. Hey guys, welcome to the Kane Audio vlog. It's Friday, it's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video. Before I look at last week's video, is there any house admin? deadmau5's remix album came out last week, so I'm pretty sure I mentioned that last week. This week I have been mostly catching up with my album. Yeah, I've been working pretty hard on that this week actually. I reckon I am about 90% done. So I have 12 tracks in what I call Draft Master, so they still need some tweaks. I sit down, I've got notes here that sort of I sit down and listen to it, and I go through each track and I just write down little notes, and I sort of switch the computer monitor off and everything just to focus entirely on that. And I'll make notes like needs effects sweep from this part to this part or whatever. So yeah, so I'm at that point now where I'm pretty happy with it. So yeah, next stop, I'm going to try and get a vocalist or two for one or two of the tracks. Yeah, so there we go, that's that. What else have I been doing? Oh, another thing I wanted to mention was thanks to the people that have been buying some Kane Audio or Dom Kane merch. For one reason or another, I don't know what the reason was, but I wasn't getting notifications of any sales. So I assumed that, obviously, when I first launched the hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, I think a few had sold, but nothing to write home about. And I kind of haven't really checked it much since. But turns out there were a few more that had sold, so thank you very much to anyone who's bought that. I'll drop a link below this video if you're interested. It's shop.kaneaudio.com. What else? Patreon wise, if you're a subscriber of my Patreon, then you will know that I am going to be making a start on the Hackintosh series at the end of this month. So if you want to be involved in there, then go get involved at my Patreon. Again, link will be below. Spotify playlist, I think updated a couple of weeks ago, probably due. I'll do that next week. I've got the next playlist ready, so that'll be next week. What else? Oh, and finally, lots of house admin today. Finally, next week I will be in Amsterdam, so I'm not sure how I'm going to do this AMA, but I will do this AMA. I come back on the Friday, I think, so I will either film it there and record it when I get back, film it there and upload it when I get back, or if I have time I'll upload it there, or I might film it on Thursday. So just be aware that next week's AMA may get uploaded as normal, or it may not be on until Saturday, I guess-ish. So yeah, just be aware of that. I think that is it for house admin. Yeah, looks like it. Yeah, so there we go. Right, on to last week's video, which was Ask Me Anything 72. Damn, we are flying through these, aren't we? Right, starting at the start. Cavalcade. Hi Dom, been out of the loop for a while, but currently stuck in bed recovering from surgery, so I've now got plenty of time to catch up on AMAs. Is that last week's? Hang on, didn't we do this? Yeah, my apologies. 73. I'll tell you what I did. I didn't add that to the AMA list. It is there now. So there we go. Right, starting at the top of last week's video, which is number 73. So we're flying through these even faster than I thought. Fanfan87. We need a Kane versus Bods in Moog battle one day. Salut, Dom. Yeah, I'd... No, actually, I wouldn't happily battle on the Moog because he'd probably beat my ass. I just tried Bitwig 3 and I really fell in love. Gonna try to have it for Christmas and let Ableton alone for a while. What convinced me the most is the brand new The Grid stock VST they implemented. Pleasant surprise when you want a simpler version of Max for Live / Reactor 6. Absolutely, and it genuinely is huge. I've not had a chance to fully explore it yet. I've just had so many deadlines recently that I've not really had much time to do anything for myself, which is why I've spent this week going through my album, because I'd sort of got it to an ish stage and I was desperate to get to the next stage, but it's been about a month since I've managed to actually put some time aside for it. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of The Grid, and I think because they've built it from the ground up, from a consumer perspective, I think it's far more malleable than Max for Live. So there's a lot more scope in there, and this is coming from an original Max user. I always liked Max before it was even, when it was MSP, basically. My question: how often do you use The Grid, Poly or FX VST in your recent projects? Because it's new, it's not something I use in all of my tracks, because I think most producers are, but I am definitely a stickler for routines. So it's not got to a stage where it's become routine for me to explore The Grid. And also, one thing I kind of need to make clear as well is I'm a big fan of using presets a lot of the time from different synths, and I might tweak them, yeah, but I don't see any point in reinventing the wheel. So if I'm, for example, if I have an idea in my head of a track and I want a techno banger or whatever, I kind of know where all the samples are in my computer and what presets I want to use, or what kind of a waveform I want to use. Even if I want to do it from scratch, I kind of know which synth I'm going to use and where and how. So a lot of that comes down to the routine and structure. Whereas using something like The Grid or Max for Live or any of those pure data type software, I think it's a bit too experimental for you to be efficient, and I think a lot of the time when I'm trying to write music, I don't want to spend 6 weeks working on one song, because that one song is never going to make enough money for me to survive for 6 weeks. So I kind of have to find an efficiency in there. Don't get me wrong, sometimes I'm able to put some time aside and just do something for myself, and that's the time that I'll sit down with The Grid and just enjoy it for enjoyment's sake. But I don't get enough time to do that. So in terms of how often I use it in recent projects, not very often, but I will say in my album of the 12 tracks, there are at least 4 or 5 that use The Grid quite significantly. So actually, when you think about it, I'd say half my recent projects based on that. Yeah, so maybe I do it more than I think. Yeah, so there we go. Sunset86, hey Dom, Bod's in, high five. Thank you for responding to my mix question. I kind of gathered that's what you'd say, but just wanted some clarification. I have only 2 short questions this week. 1, I recall once you mentioned about adding transients to a piano to help it cut through a mix. Could you elaborate again? Funnily enough, I've just done that as a video for Sonic Academy in the Tech Tips. So if you're a Sonic Academy member, I think it's next week. I'm sure they said the 16th that my next series of tech tips will be out, so next week, so keep your eyes open for that. I can't remember what I put a transient on for that, but basically the theory is if you want your piano to cut through massively, what I tend to do is I'll grab something like an 808 kick drum. You know, those ones that are just almost pure sine wave and really long and boomy, but they have that huge click at the beginning, really sharp transient at the beginning. You've probably all got an 808 kick drum that has that long boomy pure sine wave and big sharp cutting transient. Grab one of those, high pass filter it, so you're getting rid of all that long boomy kick bit, and you're left with just a little short sharp transient. Grab your piano, and just every time your piano hits a note, trigger that transient, and you've got yourself a super sharp piano that'll just cut through anything basically, because you're essentially using the transient of a kick. One thing I will say is to be careful of is obviously be careful of the levels with that, because it might sound great and sharp and cut through everything, but there's a limit to that. We're used to our kick drums being at 0 dB and sharp transients that are sharper than everything else in the track. We're not used to hearing a piano that has transients as sharp as a kick, so bring that level of the transient right down. Yeah, and then you can play around with it. I think I do something else to it as well in the Sonic Academy video, but that's kind of the basic fundamentals of it. So that's question 1. Question 2, why do most analog synthesizers, particularly budget ones, not have a selectable sine wave? I want to create a sound similar to PPK Resurrection, classic, which is just a sine wave, is it? Yes, but I think there might be a little bit more than just sine on there. There might be some odd harmonics, or at least third harmonics, I think, which would be a tube or diode distortion. Easy enough to replicate, but anyway. But can't work out on the MS-20 Mini or my Roland SEO2. Thanks as always, Mr. Kane. Have a ... read more. Great weekend. You too. I've never noticed that. Do they, budget synthesizers, do they not have a sine wave? And if not, why not? So first of all, the solution to getting a sine wave is every other waveform. A sine wave is the purest of circles. It's 2 pi r. It's a circle. It's the perfect period. It's an infinite amount of corners. You cannot get more pure than a sine wave. It's only if you want to make a triangle or a saw or a square, you add sine waves on top of sine waves, so that every other waveform, like saws and squares, is basically a multiplication of sine waves. And the reason I'm telling you that is because if you ever have a square wave and you want to turn it into a sine wave, just low pass filter it and just get rid of all the harmonics, because a square wave is a sine wave plus a sine wave plus a sine wave plus a sine wave plus a sine wave at multiples of frequencies, so that they add into the harmonics and you get the infinite harmonics, and that's what makes the sine wave square. Because if you have, I'm probably not explaining this very well, and I can't really remember it that well off the top of my head, but if you have a basic sine wave with we'll call it a 1 hertz period, and then stack on a sine wave with a 2 hertz period, when you add the angles at each sample point, the resulting sine wave becomes a slightly wonky sine wave, and it gets wonkier and wonkier, and basically the upwards and downwards slopes of the sine wave become steeper and steeper, and the middle sections of the periods become flatter and flatter, and it eventually turns into a square wave. So it's just sine waves plus harmonics. So to get a square into a sine, filter it. That's it. Basically just bring the cutoff down, and eventually it'll sound pure. So yeah, it's as simple as that. In fact, I wonder... No, I won't bother. You do it yourself. But yeah, there's no need to prove it. There we go. So yeah, so as to why they wouldn't have a pure sine wave, I don't know. I guess maybe just well, it's not even saving space, because it's there. It's built into the synth. Like I say, if it's playing a square, it's already playing a multiple sine waves. So I don't know. I can't answer that. I've never noticed that the budget ones don't do it. So that's kind of a weird one, really. I can't think of a reason why. No idea, but that's going to bother me now. Thanks. Anyway, Reality on X. Hey Dom, your remix of Caritas is awesome. It's one of my fave from Here Is the Drop EP. What's your favourite track? Thank you very much, first of all. What's your favourite track from this EP, other than yours? Mine, Spencer Brown, No Manor, Morgan Page. Bodzin, high five. I can't remember the name of the guy, which is bad of me. I want to say Mad Mike. It definitely wasn't Mad Mike. Let me have a look. Who was on there? I haven't had that much of a chance to listen to the whole album yet. I have listened to them all. Seismal D stood out. That was a great remix. Pig and Dan, obviously. There we go. Mad Zach remix. I feel bad that I haven't heard of Mad Zach. Should I have? Is he big? I'm looking at his Spotify. 6 million plays, 1 million plays, 1 million plays. I'd say he's way bigger than me, so maybe I should have heard of him. But yeah, that remix was great. That was definitely one of the most surprising for me. It really stood out. But I don't know. The whole album's good. Spencer Brown one's good. I kind of felt like the ones that I thought were going to be huge were big, but just exactly as I expected, and they didn't surprise me, and that's not a bad thing. It's not bad at all. But I liked the surprises. So like I say, Mad Zach was a surprise, and Seismal D was a surprise, and in a good way. So yeah, I think those two would probably be my standouts, because they just did something different, basically. So there we go. Andrew Hollis. Hi Dom, Bodzin. High five. On the subject of Sonic Academy, any chance you can use your powers of persuasion and see if Sonic Academy can cajole other Bitwig producers to producing content? I will speak to them about that because you've mentioned it. But I do know that you kind of have to be a bit careful there, because as with any company in the world, they need to try and appeal to the masses. And so, for example, my tech tips that are coming out on Sonic Academy next week, they're all done in Ableton. And it's more awkward and difficult for me as a Bitwig user, but I feel like I should be doing that for now, because if I was to do 10 tech tips in Bitwig, I would blitz through them. There are so many tech tips I could give for Bitwig, but for anyone who doesn't use Bitwig, they are so Bitwig specific that it wouldn't interest them. So I think it would put off a lot of people, and I think we have to be aware that I don't know the market share sizes right now, but I'm guessing Bitwig is not. Well, I can guarantee Bitwig's not the biggest. Ableton and Logic are probably the two biggest user bases. Ableton being the vast majority of market share. Bitwig, by comparison, is probably very small, even though it's a big community and it's definitely growing. I think by comparison to market share, I mean, look, it only came out in, 2014? So it's only been around for 5 years. Ableton's been around for 10 more than that. So I will have a word with them, because I know that I get lots of people liking my content for it being Bitwig when I'm doing the how-tos. So I'll have a word with them and see where they are on that, because I think, Bitwig is growing, like I say. Anyway, Cavacay. Hi Dom, cheers for your response. Bods in, high five. I found your comments on the Linux situation interesting. Native Instruments releasing Linux versions would probably be the pro audio game changer that Steam has been for gaming on Linux. Okay, did Steam move on to Linux? Unfortunately, they've stated outright that they won't be supporting Linux. However, Steinberg adding Linux support with version 3.6.7 of their VST software development kit is a step in the right direction. Yes, so that's probably one thing I didn't mention was Steinberg, who invented the VST. They're the ones who own the license to the .vst format. I didn't realise they didn't have Linux support, actually. So, other than NI, who else do you think would need to release Linux versions to tip the balance? I think Native Instruments would be by far the biggest, because everybody has NI Massive. Everybody uses Kontakt. So many sample library companies, whether it be Spitfire or huge companies like that, they rely on Kontakt's existence. Especially the smaller startup ones, myself included. When I create some patches for clients, I'll quite often make them into a Kontakt bank, because I know they can get Kontakt for free and it works on Mac and PC and it just works, so it's easy to do that. I don't know the answer to that, if I'm honest. I guess I think just Native Instruments are just by far the biggest, talking about market shares of workstations and stuff, Native Instruments must have the biggest market share of all the VST companies out there, I would have thought. And I think they have most people's go-to synths. Like I say, Massive used to be everybody's go-to synth. Now it's probably more Serum, so Xfer would be a good one. But because Xfer only have, Serum and Nerve, and I would imagine Nerve isn't that popular anymore, mostly because all the workstations have sort of progressed and do everything that Nerve did anyway. So Xfer really only have Serum in terms of synths that everybody has as a go-to. I don't know that would really tip any balance. It would certainly be a huge leap. The same with Leonard Digital, what's it called? Silent One. Can't disagree about Stranger Things. The series itself and the music are both incredible and a huge inspiration. So glad you singled out Interstellar in the way you did too. What Hans Zimmer did there is just utter genius. I find it strange that he gets a lot of stick for recycling his sound, when in reality, as far as I can tell, every soundtrack he does pushes the envelope in some way, which everyone else then copies. Please do give The Expanse a try, though. It was originally on Sci-Fi, then Netflix, but got cancelled and Amazon picked it up following a fan campaign. For me, it has spoiled almost every other sci-fi film or series that doesn't treat the physics of living in space as elegantly as it does. Okay. Plus, the music is ace, and I loved one piece of its sound design enough to use it as a ringtone. Completely agree about every point you made about Prime. Those things all wind me up as well, but I reckon The Expanse is worth a targeted binge next time you're on overnight feed change rocking to sleep duty. Yeah, that's, I think, most nights, because we both share that duty. Apart from the feeding, obviously, I'm not able to lactate. But yeah, I did add The Expanse onto my watch list, so I will give it a go, because I think that does sound like it's right up my street. And definitely, if it's got a good sound design, then it makes it even better. And you're right about Hans Zimmer. I don't know why. Well, I kind of do know why he gets a lot of stick. He gets a lot of stick because he's so famous, I think. But you know, this is one of those things where I think people struggle with somebody having a signature sound where they go, oh, it sounds like everything else they've done. Well, that's not always a bad thing. You know, especially if somebody gets famous for a certain sound, they're also going to get hired for that sound as well. I know a few people, in fact, who I won't mention, but I know a few producers who have got famous off the back of specific sounds, and they quickly grew bored of that sound, but they have to use that sound in all of their tracks, in all their remixes, and they keep getting remix requests off the back of that sound. And they hate that sound now, but they keep having to make these remixes because they've got to pay the bills and earn a living. I'm not saying Hans Zimmer hates his job, because I'm fairly sure he's made enough to retire if he wanted to. And having seen his masterclass, he sounds still very, very passionate about his work, and as he should be. Yeah, but like I say, I think it's more that the general masses maybe don't know the difference between some of his works, and they sound too similar for the general masses. But I think for most musicians and most sound designers, I think you know, I think we can all tell the difference and appreciate the difference in his work. And he clearly, you know, records an entirely new sound bank for each job. So, you know, that's a huge amount of work. So yeah, respect to him. He's definitely a guy I would love to meet and sit down and have a coffee with one day. I just, the way he speaks is beautiful. Thanks again, Dom. Glad to be back in the Cav AMA loop. My life is once again complete. P.S. One vote here for an archive version of your playlist, please. Oh yeah, I did mention that last week. My Spotify playlist. And oddly enough, my track Stoic got supported recently by Sasha on his playlist. And I noticed when looking for his playlist, he has an archive playlist. So I will look into that. And I can see 3 more. Yanis Slukmelis, bods in, high five. Deadly Custard, bods in, high five. Rod Marconi, bods in, high five. That is it, my friends. Under half an hour. I can see I've now got 90 seconds to complete this before my camera dies on me. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it has been of interest to you. Please do keep the questions coming. I'm loving these AMAs. We're now on what, that was 73, so this must be 74. Yeah, so we're on our way to 100 AMAs, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and I like it, so keep them coming. To prove that you've made it this far into the video, comment the word Starbucks, and I will give you a high five next week. Yeah, so keep your questions coming, and I'll see you this time next week. Have a good weekend. In fact, I may not see you this time next week. I'm in Amsterdam, but I'll see you around this time next week. See you soon either way. Have a good weekend. Cheers.